Kent Hughes had his mid-season media availability today, and some of the things he said have Habs fans riled up, including some controversial statements about the state of the Habs offensive game going forward, plus how he's apparently not in any rush to move a goalie or a defenseman. Is that a good or a bad thing? We'll be talking about all that on this episode of Habs Digest. The first thing we want to get into is to talk a bit about the goalies, and look, if there's one thing to take away from this media availability today, it's that Kent Hughes is certainly in no rush to make any move, and that's something we've really appreciated on this show here, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have appreciated it as well. He's going to stick to his guns, and he's only going to make trades that he really thinks benefit the team. However, at the end of the day, there is a logjam in the Habs organization that needs to be addressed. So let's just get into what he said. So, of course, he had his 2023-24 mid-season review, the full press conference. You go watch it on YouTube. It's on the Montreal Canadiens YouTube channel, free, of course, about 25 minutes long. Really, really insightful. But one of the first things he said is, it was his decision to keep 3 goalies. He said the organization wasn't ready to put Kaiden Primeau on waivers because within his discussions with other teams, they said that they really thought Kaiden Primeau would be claimed. But he said it's not even 100% that they will make a trade of a goalie. And as you see in the replies there, he said he was on RDS last week saying the goal remains to trade one of them. So it's kind of a back and forth from Kent Hughes, but I don't necessarily think it is. I think a lot of Habs fans, like I've seen some replies to this saying, what is he just going back and forth or this? No, I think the goal is to trade one of them. But again, I think the thing with Kent Hughes, and the big thing, like I said, that came out of this press conference is that he's not going to move someone if he doesn't get the offer he likes. If he doesn't get an offer that he likes for Jake Allen, 6th-round pick from Toronto, anyway, he's not going to make that move. Same thing for Kaiden Primeau. I think, like, he also said later he doesn't want to put labels on goalies, but he really does see Samuel Montembeault as kind of the guy right now without directly saying it. But he said he hopes that all 3 are great goalies for this team. And he said it's not even guaranteed in season we make a trade. And guys, remember, Jake Allen is still under contract for next season, so it's entirely possible that a Jake Allen trade doesn't even happen before the deadline, despite all the rumors, despite him obviously being a hot name in this trade market. He's one of the top targets in the NHL for good reason. He's a very solid 1B goalie and a decent, I mean, the cap hit's a bit high, but you gotta think Kent Hughes, if persuaded enough, if he got the right offer, he'd be willing to take on some of that money, maybe use his last retention spot on that. So there's been a lot of talk about goalies, but it sure seems like Kent Hughes is in no rush to make a move to trade one of his goalies right now. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Because we've talked so much about Allen. Having 3 guys is obviously less than ideal because not only is it taking starts away from Primeau, who really needs starts in the NHL for his development, it's also taking some starts away from Monty. As of lately, not so much. He's been getting more back-to-back games than he was any of the last 2 seasons, but at the same time, it's still not ideal. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. But before we get into the second topic, guys, are you enjoying this video? And are you part of the 53% of people? That's thousands of you. Every single video that are not subscribed, we're going for 15,000 subscribers. We want to be one of the biggest Habs channels on the internet. We already are up there, but if we can hit 15, that'd be such a great goal. So if you're enjoying this content, you enjoy daily Habs content, hit the button. You won't regret it. Let's move on to the second topic, and that's a bit of defenseman talk. And like I said, he's like, now we don't really feel the pressure about our defenseman. Bit interesting, right? I mean, look at the Habs organization. We have Arber Xhekaj sitting down in Laval, probably because of the defensemen that are with Montreal right now. The only one that is still waiver exempt is Jayden Struble. Jordan Harris passed his 80 games in the NHL, so he's no longer waiver exempt when sending him down to Laval. He'd have to pass through, and there's no way he wouldn't get claimed. We already saw a team claim Gustav Lindstrom, and pretty much every other Habs defenseman on the roster now, if you waived them, I think they'd be seen throughout the NHL as much more valuable than a Lindstrom. So let's just take a look at what he said. He said, we don't really sense that urgency to make a trade for one of our left-handed defensemen, but if the right offer is there, we're going to evaluate it. And he's kind of staying, like, not wishy-washy. That's not what he's doing, because he's very much sticking to his guns. It's just that he's not making a commitment one way or another, and I think that's smart. And I think it would be, I don't want to say irresponsible either, but I think it would be unexpected if he were to say, oh yeah, we really want to move someone. Because again, when you're talking, these are players, these are real people, and if Kent Hughes is going out there saying, oh yeah, we plan to trade someone for sure, it's like, these are people who are thinking, are these my last days in the Montreal Canadiens organization, right? So it's tough, because you look at the Habs left-handed defenseman slots, and of course you have Matheson, of course you have Guhle, but then you have Struble, and then you have Harris, and then you have Xhekaj, and then you have Leighton Hudson coming in probably at the end of the season. I didn't really mention that too much, but still, like, there's a logjam. And a lot of reporters asked, "Hey, do you think you could trade a defenseman for some offensive talent or move one of these guys? Do you sense that pressure?" Because they said a lot of fans, and I mean us included, we want to see some of these defensemen or even some of these prospects get moved to alleviate that logjam while also benefiting the team long term. And Kent said, "While yes, in an ideal world," we'll actually talk a bit about that later because he kind of mentioned the Cutter Gauthier trade as a sort of example of this. He said, "While yes, we want to make moves that improve our team going forward, they don't sense the urgency to move a defenseman right now." And to me, that's, I don't know. Like, I kind of wish there was a bit of an urgency, but I also understand why he says there's not. I don't know. I don't think he's lying. I think that they are genuinely just doing their strategy of standing pat. They want a certain offer, and he's going to wait until he gets it. But at the same time, it's like, you want Xhekaj back in the NHL, but he's just rotting in the AA. I mean, not rotting. He's actually been, Kent Hughes mentioned that, he's been really, really good for Logan Mailloux, and those two have been phenomenal. Mailloux's going to the All-Star game, I believe. He scored a goal in his last game. It's been going great. But you want to see Xhekaj in the NHL, and you want to see this open up, and you want to see, here are the guys for the Habs going forward, right? Anyway, it was an interesting segment, because I thought he would say, yeah, maybe we're definitely looking into it. He did say, yeah, like, it's possible, but he really didn't make anything committed. So again, I want to hear your guys' opinions on all of these things. So many interesting things. I feel like I could talk for 20 minutes, but this got to be a recap video for you guys. And I, again, highly suggest you go watch the video for yourself. Make sure I'm not taking anything out of context the wrong way. Some English, some French. Of course, I speak both, but still, have a look for yourself. But the final thing we got to talk about, there was some controversy. I'm seeing a lot of Habs fans. That is weird that it split that up like that. But yeah, controversial. New European prospect. Controversial. No, anyway. So, there were some things that he said at the end that I didn't particularly agree with or necessarily like. But I'll let you guys decide. So, we got to talk first about this. Oh no, that was the defenseman thing. Sorry, we got this. He said they'll look at trading either young players that play positions the organization already have a lot of depth in, or draft picks to acquire players that can help in other areas of need like they've done in the past with the likes of Dach and Newhook. So, okay, that sounds great. Like I said, he said, yeah, we can move players where we have depth, but he also said he's not in any rush to do that. He said that, oh, maybe you can trade. He mentioned the Cutter Gauthier trade, right? Cutter Gauthier for Jamie Drysdale. He said, well, in that case, yeah, it was player for player, but sometimes you can do a player for a draft pick and then move that draft pick for more draft picks and then those picks for players. Again, kind of talking about that Kirby Dach deal where they moved Romanov, and he said, well, in that Romanov deal, we thought a center would be great for our future. We kind of had a lot of defensemen, so we moved Romanov. But at the same time, how is that different than the current situation? Anyway, that's not the controversial part. The controversial part sort of comes when he was talking about offense. And one of the things he said was that, oh, like, you know, I think he didn't necessarily directly say it, at least I didn't really get that vibe, but he really implied that, I mean, we don't necessarily need any more top-end talent. Again, not directly. Go watch for yourself. Maybe I'm misrepresenting what he said, and I highly suggest you don't take my word for it. Go look. But one of the things he said, for example, is like, well, I mean, look at Nick Suzuki, right? He's like, I hear the word point per game player in this market a lot, but look at Nick Suzuki, right? He's not necessarily a point per game player, but he said, I mean, I represented Patrice Bergeron, and he never was either, right? And look, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't necessarily like that point. First of all, Patrice Bergeron one season, he had 79 points in 65 games. So, but I mean, I get it. He was never an 82-point player. Fair enough. But, like, at the same time, Bergeron thrived with Pastrnak and Marchand, and the guys kind of said, and even Krejci, right? There were lots of good offensive talent on that Bruins team with one of the best D-cores in the league with a guy like, you know, Tim Thomas as well, and that Tuukka Rask. And so some of the guys in the room were like, yeah, but they had other good players, right? He's like, yeah, and they were really good because of Patrice Bergeron. Okay, but you still see Marchand, you still see Pastrnak doing these things. It's like, it was a bit of an interesting answer. I didn't necessarily, like, while I do understand, like, Bergeron was phenomenal, and he's going to be amazing, he wasn't the single offensive driver for that team. They still had to have some very good talent around him to put up the scoring numbers they did. And I'm saying, like, Nick Suzuki could very well be the next Patrice Bergeron, right? It's very possible. We're seeing the defensive metrics flash now. He's on pace for another, like, 70-point season. It's going great. But at the same time, you still need that offensive talent around him. And he also kind of said, like, well, when it comes to offensive talent, I mean, obviously, you look at, we still have, like, Newhook and Dach who have been injured, right? So that's some talent back. And again, like, yes, but Dach still hasn't necessarily proven himself as a point-per-game guy yet. He might end up being a 60-point per season guy, and that'd still be fine. But we don't know yet. And Newhook, too, he hasn't shown enough to show that he is that top-level elite scorer, even though he's probably my favorite player on the Montreal Canadiens. Like, I gotta be honest, right? He still got some stuff to prove, as so does every young guy, right? So it was a bit of a weird answer, and I saw a lot of Habs fans up in arms about this, saying like, listen, I don't like this point, because how can you rely on Dach, who has had a ton of injuries, and Newhook, who's now, again, a significant injury and has never really put together a really high-scoring NHL season? How can you kind of use them as examples as for what the team could be in the future with high-end scoring? But I'm here to kind of bring everyone back down to earth, because at the same time, a direct quote from him said, like, are we looking to add more offense to this team? Yes, we absolutely are. So, like, he's clearly looking for offense, but he also implies that it's maybe not urgent again. It's really weird. But he did make a really good point, saying that, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about Shane Wright because you heard him years going into the draft. You hear a lot about Xhekaj. Again, you kind of heard his name a lot going into the draft. And the Habs didn't take either of them. But then he said, like, you hear a lot of people saying how the Habs take a bunch of defensemen, but look at the 2022 draft. The first 3 picks were forwards, right? Yeah, Juraj Slafkovsky, you had Owen, Beck, and you got Winnipeg. And he drafted those guys because he wanted some offense. And Slav is on a great track right now. He could very well get up near a point per game player if he keeps developing at the rate he is already. Winnipeg is having a phenomenal season in the OHL, and Owen Beck is in the middle of breaking out with his new team, breaking out offensively. So I understand where he's coming from. But I don't necessarily agree with the insinuation that this team doesn't need a high level scorer when they're in the competition window. And again, he didn't directly say that, but it was sort of implied. So anyway, I could ramble on about this forever. We're going to talk about this later in tonight's video after the game as well. So come back for that video. What do you guys think? Do you think Kent Hughes is kind of on point here? We just kind of see with Dach, with Newhook, we'll get lots of draft picks, we'll develop lots of guys. It's not really a worry. Or do you kind of think that this team needs that superstar offensive talent, and if they're available, we got to go get them, whether that's an Elias Pettersson, whether that's, I'm still not sure if Zegras is that kind of guy, but adding someone like that with that pedigree, pairing him with the Suzuki could be really good. Juraj Slafkovsky, of course, still has ways to go. Let me know. It's such an interesting press conference, and I could talk for ages about this, but I think for now, that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. Like I said, we'll be talking more about this tonight, but if you enjoyed, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate all your support. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.